Imagine you're standing on Meridian Street on a Friday night. The air smells like garlic, star anise, and something rich you can't quite name. There's a line outside Golden Dragon stretching half a block, couples dressed for date night, families celebrating birthdays, food critics with little notebooks tucked in their pockets. Everyone waiting. Everyone desperate to get inside. This restaurant had a 2-week reservation list. It had been featured in 3 separate magazine covers. And for 10 years, not a single person suspected a thing. Golden Dragon opened in March of 2012. The owner, a man named Victor Huang, had spent 18 months renovating a former textile warehouse on Meridian Street into something extraordinary. Lacquered mahogany panels, hand-painted silk murals, a kitchen visible through a glass wall so diners could watch the chefs work. The opening night drew over 200 guests. Within 6 months, it had its first 5-star review in the city's most respected food magazine. Within a year, it had them all. Victor was photographed shaking hands with the mayor. The menu was ambitious. Peking duck aged for 48 hours. Wagyu beef stir-fry. Abalone soup priced at $85 a bowl. Sichuan sea bass flown in fresh from the Pacific coast, or so the menu claimed. Guests raved about the flavors. One reviewer described the broth as transcendent, like nothing produced by ordinary ingredients. That reviewer, it turns out, was more right than he ever imagined. The ingredients at Golden Dragon were not ordinary. In fact, several of them were not what they appeared to be at all. On November 14, 2022, a health inspector named Sandra Reeves was assigned a routine visit to Golden Dragon. It was her 3rd inspection of the month. She had a clipboard, a UV flashlight, and a decade of experience looking inside restaurant kitchens. She expected the usual, maybe a temperature log not signed, maybe improperly stored produce. What she did not expect was to find, stacked behind a false refrigerator panel, 47 vacuum-sealed packages with no labels, no origin stamps, and no refrigeration logs. She opened one. She did not recognize what was inside. Sandra Reeves called her supervisor at 10:47 in the morning. By noon, she had called the city's food fraud division. By 2 p.m., there were 6 officials inside Golden Dragon's kitchen, the lunch service suspended, confused waitstaff standing in the dining room, not knowing what to tell the customers still seated at their tables. What the investigators found over the next 4 hours would take weeks to fully process. The Wagyu beef, tested on site, came back as standard commercial beef treated with tenderizing enzymes and a proprietary flavor injection. It had never been near Japan. The abalone, $85 a bowl, was king oyster mushroom, slow-braised in abalone extract and shaped using a food mold Victor's kitchen team had custom designed. The fresh Pacific sea bass was tilapia, sourced from a bulk commercial supplier in the industrial district 30 minutes away, marinated for 6 hours in a house-made reduction that mimicked the clean brine of ocean fish. The truffle shavings on the signature fried rice were a synthetic truffle flavoring compound purchased online in bulk quantities. Investigators found the invoices. Victor had spent $11,000 on the compound over 10 years. Here's what makes the story genuinely difficult to process. The food was delicious. Every single customer who had eaten there in 10 years had genuinely enjoyed the experience. The techniques Victor's team used were sophisticated, culinary school level, arguably brilliant. His head chef, a woman named Margaret Lin who had trained in Chengdu and Lyon, later told investigators she had not known the full extent of the substitutions. She thought some ingredients were cost-cutting measures. She did not know the entire premium menu was, top to bottom, a performance. A very convincing, 10-year-long, 5-star performance. Victor Huang was arrested at his home on the morning of November 16, 2 days after Sandra Reeves's inspection. Police found financial records showing he had charged premium menu prices while spending an average of 62% less on ingredients than his menu claimed. Over 10 years, investigators calculated the fraudulent markup had generated approximately $4.3 million in excess revenue. Victor had used some of it to fund 2 additional restaurants in neighboring cities, both under different names, both operating the same substitution system. The operation was not an accident. It was a business model. The story broke publicly on November 18th. By the end of that week, it had been picked up nationally. Former customers flooded social media, and the reactions were fascinating. Some were furious, disgusted, demanding refunds for every meal they'd ever eaten there. But a surprising number of people admitted something uncomfortable out loud. They had loved every single meal. One man posted that his wedding anniversary dinner at Golden Dragon had been the most romantic night of his life. Does it matter, he wrote, that the abalone wasn't abalone? It was still beautiful. The internet, predictably, was not ready for that question. Margaret Lynn, the head chef, was not charged. Investigators determined she had been deliberately kept in partial ignorance by Victor, who managed ingredient ordering personally and kept two separate sets of supplier records. She gave testimony for the prosecution and later opened a small noodle shop 2 neighborhoods away. It earned modest reviews. Real ingredients. No mysteries. She told one interviewer it was the most proud she had ever felt in a kitchen. Victor Huang pleaded guilty in September of 2023 to 12 counts of consumer fraud and 2 counts of false advertising. He was sentenced to 4 years. The building on Meridian Street sat empty for 14 months. The silk murals were still on the walls when a new tenant finally signed the lease. A family from Fujian province who wanted to open a dim sum restaurant. They stripped everything back to concrete and started over. They named it simply Lynn's Table. No prestige, no manufactured mystique. On opening night, there was no line outside. But the review that came 6 weeks later described the char siu as honest, careful, and deeply satisfying. 3 words that Victor Huang, with all his engineering and artifice, had never managed to earn. Here is what the Golden Dragon case ultimately taught food inspectors, restaurateurs, and the thousands of people who had sat at those lacquered tables. Deception, even exceptional deception, is a debt that compounds. Victor Huang built something people genuinely wanted: atmosphere, flavor, experience. But he built it on a foundation of lies, and that foundation required more lies to maintain, year after year, until one woman with a clipboard and a UV flashlight walked into the wrong refrigerator. Authenticity isn't just an ethical standard. In a kitchen, in a business, in a life, it is the only thing that actually lasts.